Good evening, everyone. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes as people start coming into the meeting, and then we'll start. Just going to wait a couple of minutes as people start entering the meeting room. Thanks for joining us tonight. Okay, I think we're good to start. So my name is Dan Cushing, and I'm the Director of Public Engagement at the Department of Conservation and Recreation. And we're really excited to have you join us tonight for the intersection improvement project at VFW Parkway at South Street and Church Street in Brookline. Tim, next slide. So just a bit of meeting logistics before we jump in. You're going to have an opportunity to submit comments over the next 2 weeks at our website, mass.gov/forms/DCR-public-comments. And during the meeting, you're going to have the ability to ask us questions either using the raise hand function in Zoom, which is a button at the bottom, and then a Q&A feature at the bottom as well, where you can type in your questions as well. Prior to that discussion, we're also going to answer a question that came in via email. So thank you for that. Also, please note that this meeting is going to be recorded and is recording now. Just going to be included as part of the public record. And I'm going to take this opportunity to thank the Baker Polito administration, as well as Secretary Thea Herides and Commissioner Montgomery. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Jeff Parenti, who will start talking about the team and the project.
Thank you very much, Dan, and thank you everyone for coming tonight. Before we turn it to our design engineer to go through the presentation, I just wanted to say a few words before we start, beginning with the project team and the people that you'll be hearing from tonight, starting with myself. I'm Deputy Chief Engineer for DCR, responsible for the Parkway system, including, of course, VFW Parkway. Also on the panel tonight is Val Soroka, who is the project manager on the DCR side. You heard from Dan Cushing earlier. Kelly Gavoni is the Deputy Director of Government Affairs. And we have hired VHB, who is our design consultant. And you'll hear from Tim McIntosh, who is the project manager. Also representing VHB tonight is Valerie Lenhart, who is doing the traffic signal design, and Rob Cahoon, who's doing the design of the intersection. Next slide, please. Before we start talking about this project, I want to set the tone of our discussion by first going over DCR's mission statement. Our mission statement is to protect, promote, and enhance our Commonwealth of natural, cultural, and recreational resources for the well-being of all. As you know, DCR has a wide range of properties, one of which, and a very important part of our properties, are our parkways. Our parkways, many of them, including VFW Parkway, are beautiful. One of the unique features of the parkway is its very wide median, which, as you know, is lined with mature trees. That's one of the things we really like about VFW Parkway, which makes it pleasant. But in terms of this project, that big wide median is giving us some of the problems that we have with safety that we'll be talking about tonight at the intersections. So what Tim and VHB will go through tonight is he'll show you 3 options of ways that we can address the problems that we have and give you a chance to take a look at the 3 and compare them to each other. But what we're going to see, this intersection presents us with some very classic engineering trade-offs. So we'll have to give away something to get something back in return in terms of safety improvements. And what we hope to do is that trade-off is a net positive for us. But in order to do that, we will have to give away some things which we'll go through as part of this presentation. As part of our mission statement that I mentioned earlier, although it is a roadway, we look at the parkways as something more than a place to carry cars or even bicycles and pedestrians. We also look at them as a place in and of themselves. So this is not a what we would consider a standard roadway or intersection design. Because it is a parkway and because of our mission, we do approach it a little bit differently than a standard civil engineering design. So please keep all those things in mind as we go through the presentation tonight. And I think that this is an important backdrop for the discussion as we go through. And if you go to the next slide, I'll ask Tim from VHB to take over and go through the presentation for you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Again, this is Tim McIntosh with VHB, project manager for the design engineer. And as you heard, we're talking about the intersection of VFW Parkway at South Street and Church Street. The locus map is shown on the right. Most folks attending this meeting, I'm sure, are very familiar with this location. Our meeting overview or agenda is on the left, and I plan to spend the next 15 minutes or so talking about the goals and the objectives of the project, which Jeff actually just highlighted pretty eloquently. But I think it's important to talk about the existing conditions, some of the safety concerns. Probably the main event here is to talk and walk through the 3 alternatives that have been developed to date. I'll give you a project status and we can talk a little bit about next steps. So the goals and objectives, we're primarily here to address an intersection safety issue and several issues really related to safety concerns. And as Jeff mentioned, we are focused on trying to address those, but also to create a balanced design. And we'll talk a little bit about what I mean by that when we walk through the 3 alternatives. And certainly your input is important. Ideally, we would get some information here tonight and maybe get a sense of what the preferred concept may be so that we can start thinking about moving towards final design. The next series of slides talk about existing conditions. And again, for those folks that are familiar with this location, this is probably obvious. In the spirit of full disclosure, I'm a West Roxbury resident, so I'm very familiar with the location and the parkway in general. It's its historic nature and the mature trees that Jeff mentioned. As a civil engineer, we looked at the pavement. It's in pretty good condition, so that's a positive here. VFW Parkway is 2 lanes in each direction for the eastbound and westbound directions. The photo on the top, kind of gives you a good snapshot of those, including the bike lane. There are existing bike lanes on the parkway. South Street and Church Street, South Street being to the north, and Church Street, which is actually in West Roxbury, is just to the south. Those are 1 lane in each direction. The traffic signal system, as you will see throughout the presentation, it's outdated, it's antiquated. And the pedestrian amenities on all 4 corners are not compliant, so they need to be upgraded to bring those back into compliance. So this is just a plan view of the existing conditions. We have a full topographic survey that's been completed, including right-of-way and property information. So we have all of the information we need to prepare the design and to advance it. And we've used this to develop these alternatives. It may be a little difficult to see for those of you not used to looking at a plan, but you can see the wide median right down the middle. It's I believe it's about 40 feet with the 2 lanes in each direction on VFW Parkway. And you can see South Street and Church Street on the bottom half of the plan. The safety concerns certainly are evident. We have accident data from 2015 to 2017. That's what's available. We actually expect that the 2018 accident data will be available relatively soon, but it's not quite available. But over that 3-year period, there's been 22 reported crashes. That's about 7 per year. Of those 22, 14 were angle type, side swipe type accidents. And what that means to us when we look at this is, there's a red flag. It's indicative of potential traffic signal phasing issue or perhaps a geometric issue. So that certainly caught our attention. And tragically, there was a fatality in April of 2017. And that's really why we're here today, to think about how that happened and ways to try to avoid that in the future. This intersection, the question might be, how does it compare to other intersections in the state? And so there are something called crash rates. And for this particular area, which is Brookline, the greater Boston area, that's in the Mass DOT District 6 area. And so this intersection's crash rate is slightly higher than that district average. But statewide, it's actually a little bit lower than the statewide average. Nonetheless, there are safety issues here that need to be addressed. The next couple of slides, I'm going to walk through, hopefully very simply, how the current traffic signal operates, because I think it's important to go through this to better understand the kinds of changes that we would like to make. So, and again, for those of you that travel through this intersection, you're probably familiar with how this operates, but this first image, you can see the green arrows in the lower left-hand corner. This is called a lead phase. And so if you're traveling in the eastbound direction, so if you're heading towards the rotary, what you'll see is a green light and you can proceed through the intersection towards the rotary, or you'll also see a green arrow and you can make a left turn. Everything else is stopped at this point. In the next phase, the green arrow that allows you to go left stops. It turns off, and the green ball remains. You can still proceed eastbound and westbound, and you can make a left turn in either direction, but you have to now wait for a gap on the traffic to safely make that maneuver. The next phase that comes up is the signal phase for the side streets, for South Street and for Church Street. So everything else is stopped and allows those side streets to proceed. And then finally, if a pedestrian hits the push button, the signals all stop all traffic in all directions, and pedestrians can safely cross in any of the four legs of the intersection. So that's how it currently operates today. So let's talk about the proposed alternatives. So we'll walk through three alternatives, but I thought it was important to just state up front that all three alternatives will have some features that will apply to all alternatives. For example, the traffic signal controller, the traffic signal system itself is being proposed to be totally reconstructed and replaced, including new overhead mast arms. And for those of you that may not know what an overhead mast arm is, the photo right here in the upper right-hand corner shows the existing mast arm. And it's important to note there's one signal head. So that's what you see when you pull up to the intersection today. The pedestrian signal heads that you can't really see on the in this photo, those are all going to be replaced with countdown timers. And in all of the options, the pedestrian amenities, the curb ramps on all four corners, including the median cut-throughs to accommodate pedestrians, are all going to be reconstructed and made compliant with current standards. Okay, so this is alternative one. And so the plan view shows that we are maintaining two vehicle lanes on VFW Parkway in each direction. So that's very similar to how the intersection operates today. You can see that we have laid out the new traffic signal system. That's what these sort of pointy arrows indicate. That's the new signal layout. So we'll have overhead mast arms. The main difference is we're going to have two signal heads in all directions for better visibility and improved safety. The signal is going to operate, I would say, similar to how it operates today, but it will be optimized. The pedestrian time will be optimized to allow for safe crossing. The vehicle times will be optimized to allow all the maneuvers that you currently have today. Some of the benefits here, we're not impacting any of the trees in this option. As I mentioned, we're improving the pedestrian conditions here, and we're maintaining the bike lanes on VFW Parkway. So that's alternative one. It's not included in these bullets, but this option here is probably the simplest to final design, and probably the most one of the more straightforward ones to construct. So just to note that. So this is alternative two, and this option is a little bit more complicated. Again, we are maintaining 2 travel lanes on VFW Parkway in both directions, in the eastbound and the westbound direction. However, in this particular option, we are widening into the existing median to create 2 exclusive left turn lanes. And we would, the traffic signal operation is going to operate a little bit differently than it does today. Each of those left turn lanes will have its own signal phase because, and as Jeff sort of alluded to, that median in the middle sometimes does present a challenge for opposing left turn lanes. So we need to give them their own signal phase. So that traffic signal operation will be a little bit different. The bike lanes on VFW Parkway are maintained, and as with option 1 and all the options, the pedestrian conditions are improved. I'm going to just zoom out on this alternative in the next slide here. This is the same alternative 2, but it shows you sort of the bigger picture. And these are some of the drawbacks that, or some of the things that we have to trade off for this particular option. Again, where we are cutting into the existing median, we are impacting existing trees. There are up to 16 trees that get impacted based on this layout. And these exclusive left turn lanes that are shown here have been designed to accommodate the turning traffic and deceleration into these lanes, so to provide a safe facility here. The project limits are much more extended as compared to option 1. And because of the tree impacts, there would be additional permitting that would be needed. So that's going to lengthen the design duration for this. And because the limits are longer and we've got a little bit more complicated construction with the median widening, the construction duration would be longer. So that's alternative 2. The benefit here, which I didn't mention, is that you do have the protected left pockets here. So there is a safety benefit to that. Moving on to alternative 3. Now this one, again, is a little different than the second one you saw. This one eliminates one of the travel lanes in each direction and replaces it with an exclusive left turn lane. So the good news there is that in this option, there are no impacts to the trees, and we're improving the pedestrian conditions and we're maintaining the bike lanes. But again, as with each of these designs, there are benefits and drawbacks. I'm going to flip to a larger view here that we can look at alternative 3. This kind of shows you the extent of it. And I think what we really have is on either end of the project, you're traveling on eastbound or westbound VFW Parkway 2 lanes. You end up dropping one of those lanes, and then you reopen it up at the intersection so that there's one through lane in each direction and one exclusive left turn lane in each direction. So what happens is, because you're dropping one of the lanes, there is some intersection delay in the morning, the midday, and the evening peaks. There are some traffic backups, some queuing associated with this lane drop scenario. In the westbound, so if you're traveling from the rotary heading towards the intersection, in the morning, that backup could be as much as almost 900 feet. So that's not quite to the rotary, but it's probably to, it's very close to the rotary. In the eastbound direction, say coming from Heinz Field heading towards this intersection, That back up is a little over 1,200 feet. So that's almost to the U-turn at Heinz Field. So that's the kind of trade-offs that we have here in eliminating one lane to create an exclusive left turn lane. So that is alternative 3. This summary here just summarizes in a very basic way, and I'm sure we have questions to discuss on all of these alternatives, but trying to sort of see how each of these alternatives stacks up. You know, does it address some of the things we are trying to address? Obviously, all the alternatives have a new traffic signal system, have improved pedestrian access. They all improve safety and reduce conflicts to some degree. Alternative 1 is probably the lowest there. Alternative 2, probably the highest. And that's mostly because alternative 1, if you look at the second, the fourth row down, does not provide that exclusive left turn lane scenario, whereas alternatives 2 and 3 do. Alternative 1 does slightly improve traffic operations as compared to the existing condition. Alternatives 2 and 3 really do not, because of various phasing scenarios, and alternative 3 dropping a lane. Preserving trees, a big item here. Alternative 1 and alternative 3 preserve trees. Alternative 2 does not. And then we maintain bike lanes in all 3 alternatives. So that's a summary of the alternatives developed to date. So where are we today? As I mentioned, we have completed the field survey. We have a complete field survey. We've prepared a draft traffic memorandum, which has been submitted to DCR that summarizes these options. And obviously tonight we are presenting these options at a fairly high level. The hope is to have a discussion and get some input and hopefully start to get a consensus on which option to move forward. The next steps, well, you'll have the opportunity to review and make written comments on the presentation. The design schedule depends somewhat on which alternative moves forward. One option is a little bit more straightforward than, say, the option that may require permits for tree removals, and that will affect the schedule for final design. But then once the final design is complete, we'll get into advertisement and bidding process, and then to construction. So I'll turn it back over to Dan for this last slide here.
Thanks, Tim. So just some additional information. You're going to be able to get tonight's recording and the slide deck at mass.gov/DCR/past-public-meetings. So we'll be uploading the recording and the slide deck there soon after the meeting. As we've been saying, now you can submit your public comments after this meeting. We're going to be taking your comments tonight as well. So we're going to hear you, and we're hoping that out of this meeting, we can get a good idea how we want to move forward on which alternative. But you can submit those public comments at mass.gov/DCR/public-comment. So that deadline is Thursday, June 3rd. And just a note, those comments submitted to DCR, including your name, town, and zip code, will be posted on DCR's website. And the additional contact information, most notably your email, but also your address, will only be used. So the email will be only used for outreach for future updates. But we don't include all of it in the public comment document. So we just wanted to make everyone aware of that as well. If there's any other DCR general information or project-related questions, or you want to be put on one of our listservs, you can reach out to mass.parks@mass.gov. So the next slide, we're going to start the questions and discussion. So as we mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, there is a raise hand function at the bottom. If you'd like to speak, I can unmute you. And there is also a Q&A feature where you can post written questions. First, I'm going to start with a question that was emailed to us a few days before this meeting, and it comes from Dan Teiska and Gloria Sherman Teiska. And I'm just going to read each of the questions, and then our project team will answer them. So the first question is, has the design team considered adding barriers such as higher curbstones or guardrails to keep vehicles from exiting the roadway crossing the heavily trafficked sidewalks, and careening into yards and homes along the Parkway after high-speed collisions. So if Tim or Jeff would have a answer to that.
So I can start, and then I'm going to flip just because I do know that the people that asked the question, I believe, live on this corner here, which is the corner of at Church Street and VFW Parkway. I guess to answer the question, this intersection improvement project really is not considering the addition of, let's say, guardrails, which would be an approved traffic barrier. The roadway is fairly straight. I'm certainly, I certainly can understand maybe there's been some errant vehicles maybe trying to make this turn that may have lost control, things like that. I think that, setting the granite curb to anything higher than 6 inches is really not standard. I do know that on the corner here, it does look like some of the granite curb isn't quite as high as 6 inches, and that granite curb would be reset, to the extent that we're redoing pedestrian curb ramps on the corner. We really can't have barrier on the corner because that would hinder the pedestrians' ability to cross safely in all directions. So I think increasing granite curb reveal in our area, in this corner area, is possible, but I don't think we are considering adding any physical barrier along the public way in this area.
Thanks, Tim. The second question from the same group here, they said, has the design team considered adding license plate cameras to the intersection to catch and automatically ticket those who speed and routinely run the light, creating hazards for other drivers, pedestrians, and homeowners?
So again, I'll start, and Jeff maybe jump in if need be, or others. But my understanding is that traffic cameras for law enforcement is not something that the state agencies use. I'm not quite sure if it's legal at this juncture. So it is not something that we are proposing. And again, my understanding is it's not something that we're allowed to do at this stage.
Yeah, exactly right. It's not allowed per Massachusetts law right now. There are many groups that are interested in making it permissible by law. But right now it has not been, no such bill has been passed. So unless and until that happens, we would not be able to include that in this project.
Thanks, Tim and Jeff. Appreciate the answer. So I don't see any questions in the Q&A, and I do see a hand raised by Pete. So Pete, I'm going to allow you to talk, and then you're going to have to unmute yourself here.
Can you hear me, Dan?
Yep.
Hey, first off, I appreciate everybody taking the time to evaluate these different options. I live on Clearwater Road, and obviously this is near and dear to my heart. So I appreciate you guys looking through all the different options, and specifically Ed Coppinger for following up on this. I had a couple of quick questions. So if you look at this, the way it's laid out here, and you just moved it down to the further toward past Heinz, is there the same challenge further down near like the gas station and that open going up to the cemetery? Is there the same challenge of taking the left turn with cars running lights and speeding that we experience here at Church and in South? That's my first question.
So maybe just to clarify, so I'm pretty familiar with the Parkway, and I know that you might have been describing like the intersection of the VFW Parkway at, let's say, Corey Street.
Yeah, maybe.
And then maybe even VFW Parkway at LaGrange Street. And those, those are set up a little bit differently currently than what exists here today at South and VFW. In those two locations, and this is maybe what you're asking, Pete, and at those two locations, you actually have a left turn lane, and you have the 2 through lanes. And the difference there is that there is no bike lane at those locations. And I believe for them to get, and again, I'm not sure when this was implemented, but my guess is it's been probably 20 years or so, because it's been there for quite some time. But it does look like they narrowed into the median, or maybe on the opposite side slightly. They were able to, it appears that they were able to save trees, but at the expense of the bike accommodations in at least 2 of the legs of the intersection. So I don't know if that really answered your question, but it is a little bit of a different existing condition at those locations as compared to here.
No, I appreciate that, Timothy. I guess, when I look at it, you want to look at all the different options. And if there is a solution already in place that seems to address and be a little bit safer, is that something that we could potentially consider? It sounds like that the setup is a little different based on what you said around the bike lanes. But from a structural standpoint, you still have 2 lanes going towards the rotary, and you have 1 lane taking a left, correct?
At those locations, that's correct. And,
Okay.
and we did not specifically in this exercise look at, trying to mimic, something like that here.
Okay.
It's something that we could do, but again, as with all of these options, there's a balance, right?
Sure.
So, we would probably need to widen into the median a little bit. My guess is that we would have less impact to trees, but you would be dropping the bike lane, and that would be one of the drawbacks of that scenario. That would almost be a 4th option that we would need to look at.
So I'll let you guys make the determination, but I'm just thinking if there's a solution that's, and I don't know what the numbers are. You guys posted the numbers up earlier about the number of accidents and all, but if that scenario represented a much safer and, I realize that there'll be give and takes here, right? I realize that, there will be no solution that doesn't have some negative effect or ill effect, or pushback. I'm just, it may be something worth considering, Timothy, because it seems to, I drive that road like yourself, almost every single day. And that seems, I don't see people flying through there, and I never feel that, that anxiety or that rush to have to cut through to take that left.
Right.
So food for thought. Thank you. I appreciate this, guys, really much.
And,
That's
and
an
we're,
interesting, sorry, Dan.
oh, you can go, Jeff. I was just going to thank Pete for his comments. So if you had something to say.
Yeah, just a few. I agree with Tim. What you described, Pete, is a 4th option. It would, and the trade away, we'd have to trade away the bike lanes, as Tim mentioned. We already do at Corey Street, and we would have to move the light poles. That's no big deal. We would shift those over, but we would be encroaching on the mature trees there, and we would have to. And how much space we would need is all in the details. But and we would have to, and I'm not a tree expert, I don't pretend to be one, so we would have to consult with our arborist and our landscape architecture group to determine how far we can go into the median to create that, to carve out that left turn lane and not encroach on the trees or impact the health of the trees. You are getting close to the root zone. As it stands, those curbstones are, as the curbs are placed today, they are a little bit too close to the root zone. If we move them further into the median, it would be difficult to set the curbs then, and then we'd be getting close to the tree trunk. So that's a trade-off that we would have to consider. If we did show you alternative 2, which is the one where we carved out the median entirely to get those, to get the full left turn lane in, but as you saw, it does fully remove several mature trees.
Yeah.
And that is a big trade-off for the Parks Agency. So I think that the 4th option that you described is a completely valid one. It's a nice compromise, and it's probably one we should keep talking about. And I'm interested to hear what other people if other people on in the meeting tonight are interested in something like that, and we can ask VHB to do a little bit of work, and we can show you that if that's something that people are interested in.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Pete and Tim. So Pete mentioned Ed Coppinger. So I know that we have a staffer from Rep Coppinger's office on the call. So I just want to thank Pat Brown, who's on the call listening in. So I just wanted to let it be known for the record that Rep Coppinger and staff are here. Rep Coppinger's staffer is here. So there were a couple of comments that came in. So I'm going to read those, and then I'm going to allow Karen an opportunity to speak because I see she has her hand risen. So I'm going to start with the person who posted something in the chat. So it's Vicky Henry. So I'm just going to read Vicky Henry's comments. For this and the current line project in Murray, could you put up a warning slide that if it is true, new lane configurations or some kind of warning? You've already caused one accident at Murray Circle and so many near misses. You dropped a lane from Murray to Forest Hills without a warning and is not going well. Thank you. Thanks for the comments. We're just here trying to figure out for this intersection how we can make those changes to improve those safety conditions. So we thank you for your comments, and I'm going to move to the other open comments here. So Gloria says, would like to make a comment on alternative 3, forcing a merge to one travel lane for the dedicated left-hand turn lane would naturally force a slowdown in traffic and enhance traffic calming. This is a good thing. Excessive speed on the eastbound travel lane is a problem. So thanks for that comment. And then the other comment Gloria posted here is, additionally, has the impact of the merge to one lane with the new left-hand turn lane in option 3 on safety in the bike lane been considered? I don't know if someone could answer that. So it's has the impact of the merge to one lane with the new left-hand turn lane in option 3 on safety in the bike lane been considered?
So if I could start, if I understand the question, in alternative 3, we are dropping one travel lane. We're narrowing the 2 through lanes, as you approach the intersection from 2 to 1. The bike lane is maintained in that option, so we're not impacting the bike lane. It gets maintained through the intersection very much how it currently exists.
Can you show that, Tim? Can you flip back to?
Yeah, let me.
We've memorized it, but I don't know if all the attendees have yet.
Yeah, good.
There we go.
So, I don't know if folks can see my cursor sort of hovering or not, but, coming from the rotary here, you've got 2 lanes. You can't really see the lane, the lane markings, but there's 2 lanes, and then over the course of it's probably about 300 feet is how you drop it from 2 to 1. Then you can see the white line at the top, sort of just below the trees that are depicted. That's the bike lane. That's not affected. And then as you get past this gore area, the yellow lines here, it then opens up. And so the vehicles can then choose to enter into the left turn lane or stay in the through lane. And that bike lane again remains.
Thanks, Tim. And Gloria has a follow-up comment with regard to this. So would a protective barrier for the bike lane at the merge be an option? Cars will naturally move to the right.
So I'm assuming you're wondering about some kind of protective barrier. A lot of times what we see is plastic delineator posts that are spaced. I think the question is, could those be considered in this area, maybe to further enhance or further call to the driver's attention that there's a bike lane on the right-hand side? I think that's probably what is being asked. And I think the answer is yes. Generally, those are placed in what's called a buffered bike lane, which is a little bit wider than a bike lane. I believe we have a 6-foot space. So we would end up placing those plastic delineators, in a space that's about a foot. So you would be, as a biker, you might feel a little constrained there. But it would be something visible and a physical object that would certainly highlight the fact that there's a bike lane there, when, in the area where the two lanes of travel are merging.
We haven't been using plastic posts on parkways. And if you look at plastic posts that have in the city of Boston have been using, but if you look at their condition after, say, several months of use, you can start to see why they're not they're not in good condition, shall we say. And as Tim mentioned, we don't have a lot of room. Even if we did, we wouldn't have a lot of room to put them because the line itself is only 4 inches wide. So we would encroach on either the bike lane or the travelway, and that's not a lot of space. It is true that the vehicle that's merging to the right would be naturally going to the right, but as Tim also mentioned, that happens over a 300-foot length. So the vehicle merging to the right would be doing that over a long distance and then would settle into the right-hand lane. And then you still have the white edge line that we call it on the border of the bike lane. And presumably if the vehicles are traveling within the marked lines, which is what they're supposed to be doing, they would not be encroaching on the bike lane. And then the bike lane itself is as Tim said, it's about 6 feet. So there's some room there. The lane itself is 12 plus feet. These merges are federal standard design, and they're designed to be large enough and long enough to give the driver enough warning that there is a merge, plus the signs that we'll be posting, so they will not be surprised that the lane will be dropped, and then they'll be able to negotiate their into the single lane approaching the intersection. And I want to throw in too that being Boston drivers, anyone turning left will drive right over the gore marks anyway. So that's what the practice is, and we all do it. I know that if we do a brand new intersection here, we'll see people doing that too. So those yellow markings are just paint. We would not be moving the curb line out to where the edge of the yellow is. So that would be, we'll see those fade out within a year or two. We'll have to put them back for people driving over them. But this sort of lane drop condition is rather common, and it's also common where we have bike lanes. I'm confident that it will be all right.
Thanks, Tim and Jeff. So I'm going to move over to Karen now, and I'm going to allow you to talk, and you're going to have to unmute yourself now.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. My name is Karen Shabon. My husband David's here with me. We live at 6 Hollywood Road, which is directly behind the Tishkas on your map, on the corner of South and Hollywood, or Church and Hollywood. So we're on the border. Few comments. There's a significant number of cars that head north on Church Street. There's a lot of commuters coming into Brookline, or whether they're trying to get to Route 9, they use that passageway, leading to a considerable amount of traffic from September to May. And in the winter, it's ridiculous, the amount of cars that are there. And you've had that light cycle probably like 15 seconds for as long as we have been here. So that needs to be changed. The timing when you do all this needs to be changed so that people can actually get through. And the light posts that are on the corner of VFW and South Street, yes, have been knocked down multiple times by these accidents that keep happening at that corner. And the poor Tishka's home has been struck. So putting up concrete barriers is not asking a lot when you're a pedestrian standing there wondering if you're going to get driven on or just impaled by a car. If you could put up 4 or 5 concrete posts on that corner, it would save someone's home or their life. Going forward, there is a curb on the mall that is about 12 to 18 inches high, protecting your trees. Asking for a higher curb where there's an opportunity for cars to jump and come and hit our homes. We had a car come across our lawn. If you look where my home is, a car came across our lawn and off of our wall. That's ridiculous for a car to come through the intersection that fast and end up doing that. Okay, and now my question is, have you actually watched and seen how much bike traffic there is on this road? Because someone trying to travel through this intersection is taking their life into their own hands when they travel on a bike. I know it's a law and it needs to happen, but is there a way to move it up onto these wide sidewalks that we have that are beautiful to walk on? But when you go to other places, they expand these walkways so bicyclists and pedestrians can coexist. And we do have these really wide walkways. I mean, you could push up close to the tree, I think, I don't know, I'm just asking that. And I agree, the painted line in the middle of the road where the mall is, telling people that they need to go to the right side or to the left side, because that's how we were taught how to drive. Putting a double line there and a sign that says you do not have the right of way. When you are in the middle, you are rolling the dice when you cross that lane of traffic. That's what majority of these accidents, this is how they have been caused, because someone thinks they can go and they can't. So I'm not a fan of any of your options right now. I like Pete's comment that why are all the other intersections set up with a third lane? Why was our intersection left off of the third lane, the left lane? Why didn't that happen to this intersection? That's what I think needs to happen. We need that left turn lane like all the other intersections. So you're getting 22 years of a lot of frustration right here. So I would question the bike lane being moved to a safer place, because that intersection is horrible. And painting the middle line, and I'm just going to repeat myself, that putting up posts on that corner could save a few pedestrians from the sheer panic that they have. Just waiting for the light to change. That's all.
Thanks for your comments, Karen. I'm gonna let Tim and Jeff address some of them now, and appreciate your voice on the alternatives that we have. And I do want to mention that one of the alternatives, alternative 2, does provide that extra lane that we were discussing. I understand that you were talking about Pete's suggestion about the rest of the Parkway, but there is an alternative that does talk about the implications of extending the lanes and what that would do. But I'll let Tim and Jeff talk a little more.
It does, but it makes it go to one lane versus 2 lanes.
So just to jump in, just to address that, I think Dan was talking about this alternative 2, which is shown on the screen. It maintains the 2 travel lanes in each direction. It maintains the on-road bike lane, but it does carve into the median exclusive left turn lanes. And that has an impact to trees.
I know, trees. My children's life.
I think, I'm probably taking these questions out of order, but I think this existing conditions plan might help. You mentioned the wide sidewalks, I think on both sides. I think really the sidewalk itself is probably a combination of concrete sidewalk and asphalt, depending on where you are, aren't very wide. They're probably 6 feet-ish, maybe they're 8 feet. What's wide is that we've got a pretty healthy grass area pretty much in all locations with pretty healthy mature trees. I think one of the things that we would need to carefully consider, if we were considering trying to do something by making that sidewalk wider, maybe to be more like a shared use path, we have to consider the tree roots. Jeff was mentioning earlier tree roots as it related to trees within the median, but the trees on these outside edges are equally as mature and would need to be considered if we were considering doing any kind of widening of the actual physical concrete or asphalt walkway. We'd need to think about that. And again, this is the other thing to consider is that this is an isolated intersection improvement project. So when we start to think about things like a shared use path, we tend to like to think about it as more of a corridor type improvement. And we're really that's kind of beyond the scope of this work at this stage. I think the only other thing that I could offer, I mean, I do know, I can appreciate, you know, the desire to have some additional protection on this corner. It would be a little difficult to do that. I think we do need to maintain curb breaks on each corner for pedestrian access. You know, could we consider a bollard of some sort? I think that's possible. But I don't think that we could get a guardrail or a concrete barrier in, you know, to effectively protect that corner just because it needs to remain open. And I'm sure I didn't address all the questions there, but Jeff, please jump in if I've missed things.
Yeah, just a word about concrete barriers, whether they're any vertical barrier that's you know, that's a pole or a post, whether it's made out of concrete, or you can even have concrete filled steel bollards. I've seen those, but those are not intended for roadway design. Concrete will a vertical concrete post will snap if exposed to any kind of impact. They're not designed for that. They're actually pretty weak. Concrete is strong for certain things, but for a sideways impact, they don't work at all. And so instead of that, good roadway design, the three concepts that Tim went through earlier, the objective here is to reduce the number of crashes that occur in the first place. And for the ones that do occur, we want to reduce their severity. So when you do have a crash, and there isn't a condition that we can tell you that there will never be a crash ever at this intersection. But the crashes that do occur, we would expect them to be lower impact crashes, lower speed crashes, like rear end crashes from time to time that happens when people aren't paying attention when the light turns yellow. But those crashes tend to stay within the roadway and not leave the roadway and get onto the sidewalk or go beyond the property line. So that's the objective here today. If we can keep the crashes in the roadway itself and reduce the number of them, Tim mentioned before, with the crash history that we found, there's 7 crashes per year on average based on the records that we have. If we can reduce that in half or by 2/3, I think that the safety of this intersection is vastly improved. And I think we can get there with certainly alternative 2 or 3, and even choice 4, which we talked about a little bit earlier, which is a new option. I think we can get there. And in that case, we wouldn't need to resort to something like a concrete bollard or other vertical pole that would be used on the corner.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Tim. I'm going to move over to the Q&A again. So we're going to go to David's post here. A question about alternative 2. Do you have any information on whether or not Do you have any information on whether or not new trees can be planted in the median post-construction? If so, how many years they might need to grow to maturity? Thank you.
Let's see, raise your hand on the panel if you're a tree expert. We do not have our landscape experts here tonight. I do know we routinely plant trees, and we actually routinely plant trees as part of our civil engineering projects like this. We can certainly do that as part of this project. However, I will not pretend to be able to tell you how fast trees grow. One thing I know is that it takes a long time for a tree to reach the size of the trees that we have on the median today, and even on the side. So many years, possibly decades. The biggest tree you can plant is still pretty small. And even then, you have to hope that the tree survives the first few years of its life. So the trade-off that we're talking about, I wouldn't say that trading an old tree for a new tree is an even trade at all. If we decide to remove the mature trees or some mature trees. So we would have to consider that trade-off to be a negative in terms of any tree removal.
And just to add in, I flipped to the existing conditions, that the trees generally in the median area that would be impacted vary in diameter from, it looks like the smallest tree that I can see is 18-inch diameter, which is a pretty massive tree. And it looks like the largest one that's in the general area is maybe as much as 3 feet in diameter. So these are, I would say, and again, I'm not a tree expert either, but these are very, very old trees. And I agree with Jeff, it would take a very long time to have a new tree, which is, might be a 3-inch to 4-inch caliper tree. That's actually considered large when you're planting them. To grow to that size is going to take a very, very long time.
Thanks, Tim and Jeff, for answering it to the best of your ability. We know you're not tree experts, but thanks for the information that you could provide on the context of these trees and the impacts planting new trees would face relative to the ones that we would have removed. And David, we hope that answers your question. So I'm going to mark that as answered live. And then Gloria has a few more questions and comments. So how about a concrete strip instead of plastic posts? That's with regard to the bike lanes.
Don't mean to answer a question with a question, but a concrete strip, meaning like something flush with the pavement, like a buffer.
I was assuming a scored concrete strip was the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, the question only, sorry. So it says, how about a concrete strip instead of plastic posts? So that's what I have here.
We can use that. We can use this. There's a few left over. We don't really use them anymore, but you can certainly use a scored concrete strip. The disadvantage is that when tires go over them, they're extremely noisy. I'm not sure that's something that you want to listen to, but yes, it is an option for us.
And Jeff, I would just add that from a space, available space point of view, remember that, we've got about 6 feet or so available for the current bike lane, to take up some of that space with a concrete strip, as you point out, will be noisy, whether it's like a scored cement concrete, but that takes up some space. Then the smaller or narrower you make it, the more susceptible it is to heaving and maintenance issues. Snow plows are going to catch it, and it's likely not going to last very long. So it's just a practical, as a practical matter, it may present some maintenance issues that would have to be dealt with on a fairly regular basis.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Jeff. So yeah, I hope that answers the question on that, Gloria. So we're gonna go to a couple of your comments here as well. So the main issue with the Parkway is speed. We do not see any of the options addressing this main issue. That's Gloria's comment here. I think Jeff or Tim, if you want to address any portion of that, but thanks for the comment, Gloria.
As Tim mentioned earlier, what we're talking about tonight is an intersection improvement, and the safety issues that we discover that we're talking about tonight are collisions between vehicles that are crossing paths. There is a speed element to most crashes, but when you improve an intersection, reducing speed by just changing the intersection is very difficult. Tim also mentioned that when we were talking about the possibility, the question was raised, can we do a separated or raised bike lane? Those are things you do in a corridor project. We can address speed issues on a corridor when we rebuild the entire corridor. And that's a good way to do that. That's not the project that we're talking about tonight. We are constrained to just the intersection. However, I would suggest that reducing to a single lane approach on the Parkway would contribute quite significantly to reducing speeds along the Parkway. Because if you're merging, and whether you're the vehicle merging or the vehicle behind who's being merged in front of, then your foot is probably on the brake. And so that tends to reduce speeds. Right now, when the light is green and you have the 2 lanes, there is no reason to be on your brake here. And so if we're interested in reducing speeds, I would steer us to alternative 2, which reduces to a single lane.
And actually, sorry, Jeff, to clarify, that would be alternative 3. yes, I agree.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Thanks, guys. So Gloria has another comment here. So this one is you guys provided an answer regarding guardrail earlier, and she says that I would disagree with your comment about adding a guardrail to the corner. Look at the barriers on West Roxbury Parkway around the rotary on the outsides. These are short guardrails that keep cars from going off the rotary into yards. A short length guardrail on the corners could keep cars in the road and off the sidewalks out of our yards. And then in parenthesis here, it says Putterham Circle. I believe that's the rotary that Gloria is referring to. So I don't know if you guys have any comments on those short guardrails that she's referring to.
So I think I'm familiar with the Putterham rotary, and I do know where those guardrails exist. I think the one difference between that situation around the rotary and what we're talking about here is that, you know, that the guardrail in the rotary, you know, does not need to be interrupted to accommodate a pedestrian crossing. So it stops shy of that. And if we're talking about on this corner right here, which is what I think we were talking about earlier, we need to maintain openings to facilitate pedestrians crossing to the north and to the west. And really that occurs on all four corners. So I think I know the situation you're describing, Gloria, and I think it's a slightly different situation here for the pedestrian access.
In addition to that, the reason why guardrails work is because they're long. They're strong because the individual steel posts that line the guardrail hold up the other ones along the line. So if you can picture a line of people holding hands at arm's length, what's the game Red Rover? When you set someone over, it's very difficult to break through the line because all those hands are being held together. But if there's only 3 people, it's much easier to get past. If you have a short section of guardrail on a corner and there's only 2 posts and there's an impact there, that entire assembly will flop over because there's nothing on the ends that are holding it together. So that's why when you see guardrail, generally they're very long. You do see short sections of guardrail from time to time, and I suppose we could do it here. As Tim said, we have to leave openings for the wheelchair ramps. That's not an option. We can put short sections of guardrails up, but they're like the concrete bollard conversation we had earlier. In that small application, they wouldn't be very effective in preventing or absorbing an impact of a collision. I think that the collisions that we're talking about that enter onto the sidewalk into the private property, those are almost always a result of an angle crash that Tim described before. And that generally for this intersection, we talked about the width of the median, which is a negative in terms of collisions here. But the angle crashes happen when there's a vehicle turning left off the Parkway, for example, against another one that's going through. That's an angle crash and can happen at high speeds. Or if there's a vehicle from the side street going straight that collides with a vehicle from the Parkway, and that could happen when one of those vehicles runs a red light or runs at the end of the yellow, and there's a collision there. Both of those types of crashes are the types of crashes that we're trying to prevent with the options that we showed you tonight. And if we can prevent those crashes from occurring, and I think we can, then we will significantly reduce the likelihood, almost to zero, that the crashes will end up on the sidewalk or on private property.
And thanks again for that answer, guys. Helpful information. Those angled crashes sound like, you know, if we can help prevent those from happening or occurring to begin with, it sounds like we can prevent a lot of the need for some of these structures and such. But thanks again for the answer. And I'm gonna move over to the chat. So Tim, do you think you could actually run through alternative 3 again? We have George in the chat just requested if we could go over that one more time.
Certainly. So alternative 3, this is I would say the enlarged version, sort of focusing on the intersection. And in the immediate intersection, you can see that the lane use on the Parkway consists of a left turn lane in the westbound direction, a left turn lane in the eastbound direction, and then you've got essentially a through lane in each direction, and you can make a right turn from that through lane. But what we're doing is we're dropping one of the through lanes and replacing it with the left turn lane. No impact to trees, maintaining the bike lanes on the Parkway. When we move to the enlarged version, you can kind of see how we develop that. And the way we develop that with these yellow lines, they're called gore areas. As Jeff mentioned, we're not changing the curb line of the median, but we're adding pavement markings. And again, they're called gore markings. And that's how we bring two lanes on the on the far right-hand side of the screen over about a 300-foot distance down to one lane, kind of at the widest point of that those yellow gore lines. And then it starts to open back up so that a vehicle can choose to stay in the through lane and either go through or make a right, or can decide to enter into the left turn lane and then can make left turns with assistance of the traffic signal phasing. So again, some of the trade-offs with this scenario is that you do have additional delay in the intersection. You do have some additional queuing and backups to in each direction. But as Jeff mentioned, this would serve to slow traffic down because of the merge. So that may be considered a benefit. Hopefully that sort of describes it. I didn't talk about all the specific things, but it was mentioned the double yellow line in the middle of the intersection. I think we'd be proposing that in all scenarios. So that would help channelize folks coming through the intersection. I think that's that's an important addition to all of the concepts.
Thanks, Tim. And George, if you have any other questions with regarding to the presentation, don't hesitate to ask. So we're almost approaching time, but we're gonna have we're gonna be able to stay on until 7:30. So there's also an opportunity to post your questions online if anything else comes up over the course of the next 2 weeks, to voice your preferred alternative, or if you have any other additional comments. But we're going to go to Karen's posted Q&A question here. So Karen says, can you put an island in the intersection of VFW and South?
So just to assume that might mean, in place of this yellow line that I'm hovering, could there be a physical island here? Do you think that is the question?
Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah,
That's what I thought too, Tim.
I think it presents some challenges for the vehicles that want to kind of maneuver through the intersection and make the left turn in both directions. And certainly from the side streets, if let's say you're traveling north and you want to make a left turn onto the Parkway, it may present some challenges. And again, maybe not so much for a passenger vehicle, but for larger vehicles, let's say emergency vehicles, whether that's a fire truck or a large ambulance, snow plows, I think are going to have a hard time maneuvering through that. I think that, that the purpose would be to channelize. I think that the pavement marking that's shown does achieve that purpose. We might consider maybe making the yellow lines a little bit wider to maybe emphasize it, but I'm not sure. And again, Jeff, please jump in with thoughts, but I think that there may be some issues with raising that and having like a raised median in that area.
You did, Jeff, sorry.
Sorry, folks. Reminds me of the intersection we just completed in Malden on Fellsway East that Val just completed a few months ago. Almost the same layout with the wide median. And that was one of the first comments that we got when it opened was, well, what do we do in the middle of the intersection? And it turned out okay. We have the double yellow in there. People turn left. They're in the middle for a little while, and then they go out the other end. So Tim's right. Putting if we put an island in there, it would be really small. We could also think about some kind of a flush material. We were talking earlier about a scored concrete or even a cobblestone material with the yellow around it. We could consider that, but we'd have to talk through what the benefit would be versus, and again, there'd be a noise impact too. More with the scored concrete, less with the cobble. But as Tim said, we would also have to consider, and we would do that because for the fire apparatus to get around the corner, they would need to be able to mount it. So we wouldn't be able to do the 8 or 12 or 8 or 10 inch curb reveal that we have on the inside of the median. But it's worth talking about. That space in the middle is somewhat large, but yeah, we'll go through our options. The simple double yellow might be a little too simplistic for this application, and the design team can think through some other options, and that can be a detail that we do. And it is common to all the options, so we can work through that during design development after we choose a preferred concept.
All right, thanks, guys. So Tim, do you think you could actually go back to the additional information slide? So I just wanted to reiterate that tonight's recording and slide deck is going to be available at mass.gov/DCR/past-public-meetings. And if you have any comments or suggestions on this project, if you hadn't already voiced them tonight, or if you have any ideas in the coming weeks, you can check out the recording, watch it over, kind of sit on this. I know it's new information that's coming in. You can submit those comments, mass.gov/DCR/public-comment. You can submit those until June 3rd, and then we would be moving on to the next phase from the preferred alternative from this meeting. And I just wanted to reiterate that as we had an opportunity where there aren't any hands raised and there aren't any questions in the Q&A. We'll be on for a little while longer, but I'm going to read one of the comments in the chat because it talks about a preferred alternative that they like. They said, "Thanks again for your efforts and consideration. I think that reviewing option 4 would be interesting. If that turns out not to be an option, my vote would be for option 2. So Pete, thanks for weighing in. What we're really doing here tonight is trying to get that feedback about these preferred alternatives. So if you've been watching and you've been taking into consideration what you think, feel free, you could voice that in the chat, or you could post it in the Q&A, or if you have any other comments that you'd like to provide, you could also raise your hand and speak. But we'll be on the call for a little while longer. But if nothing else arises, we'll end the meeting. But we'll wait until any sort of other comments come in, or if anyone wants to say anything about the project. So yeah, we'll be waiting here for a little bit. And if I would say that if nothing comes in by like 7:15, we can end the meeting early. I just want to give everyone an ample opportunity to share if they'd like to share still, or if anything else comes up. But we'll end the meeting momentarily. I just want to give everyone ample opportunity. So George asked, how many left turns occur at different times? So I believe that's like a traffic counting question, if we have that available.
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. I wonder if the question is, how many existing left turns are there? In other words, I mean, we have done traffic counts at the intersection in February of 2020. So we have that data. I don't happen to know off the top of my head how many left turns exist or occur, let's say, in the morning peak hour or the evening peak hour. Val, you may have that information, Val Lenhard.
Yes, I do. I actually just opened it up to refresh myself. Generally, in the westbound direction, we have throughout the day less than 20 between a left turn and a U-turn. It's the eastbound direction, so heading towards the rotary, that is significant in the morning. What we gathered was almost 300 vehicles turning either left onto South Street or taking a U-turn to, excuse me, to head back in the westbound direction. In the evening and in the middle of the day, it's relatively down to 50 cars.
Thanks, Val. Really appreciate the answer. And George, if I hope that helps kind of give you an idea about the different turns that are happening there. So I think with that, we're gonna end the meeting. We appreciate everyone joining us tonight. We got a lot of valuable information from the participants, and we're hoping that you can provide us with any additional thoughts that you may come up with on our public comment page, which we will be uploading the recording and the slide deck. So thanks again for coming out, and we hope you have a terrific evening. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.